Welcome in, everyone, to Lively Lewis Stories.
That's right, we're back with even more awesome adventures with Levi and Ivy.
Set your storytime meter to fun and get ready to join the Lively Lewis crew.
All you need is your imagination and...
Off we go!
I can't wait to see where our story takes us today.
Have you ever wanted to get more Lively Lewis in your life?
Well, we've got you covered.
Grab an adult and zoom over to livelylewisshop.com.
Or just click on the link in our show notes.
Enough about that. Let's get to today's super Lively Lewis story.
Levi, you have to pay attention, said Levi's teacher for the second time that morning. I know a lot of you are excited for this afternoon's book fair, but we have to first get through our math lesson. Levi nodded at his teacher, but he had a faraway look in his eye. He was trying to pay attention, but numbers, multiplication signs, and addition symbols were just not holding his interest that day. And that went for his sister Ivy and their good friend Alexandria. The three of them were known to their friends as the Book Buddies, because, as the name would have you believe, they loved books. Old, new, long, short, pictures or not, the Book Buddies loved nothing more than getting lost in the pages of a good book. Being transported into another world as they gently turned page after page was the perfect day for them. Whether a mystery, a story of friendship, a tale of days gone by, or the idea of what tomorrow would bring, they couldn't get enough. So you can imagine how hard it was for the three friends to pay attention to math on the day of the school's annual book fair. They had even helped their favorite librarian, Mrs. Whittaker, set up for it that day before. And as they were doing so, she told them something that they just couldn't stop thinking about. She made mention to them once the many bookshelves, bookstalls, and tents were up in the school courtyard that year's book fair would prove to be one that they would never forget. Mrs. Whittaker went on to tell them that this was the school's 100th book fair, and it was set on this day of centuries-long traditions, something very special and downright magical would happen. "Hey, Levi," whispered Ivy. "I can't stop thinking about what Mrs. Whittaker said when we were setting up the book fair yesterday. What magical thing do you think will happen today at the book fair?" "Maybe all the books are half price," smiled Levi. "That would be amazing, but I don't think that would be that magical," replied Ivy. She then whispered her question to Alexandria, who was trying to concentrate on her multiplication problems. "I know, I can't stop thinking about it either," said Alexandria, pushing aside the math worksheet. "When I think of magical and books, I think of spell books. Maybe they'll be selling spell books. Maybe we can make a wish on the book to get as many books as we want. Or maybe we can make a wish to go inside any book we want," added Ivy. "Now that would be magical. Could you imagine running through the pages of the Enchanted Chronicles?" That was Ivy's favorite book, filled with mysterious forest, wise gnomes, friendly giants, and gallant knights on horseback. "That would be unbelievable," said Levi. "But you know I would pick the quest for the lost treasure to explore. To be able to search for treasure through the caves of courage with the Wiley boys would be a dream. What an adventure that would be. And you know I would choose the Time Traveler's Journal," added Alexandria, trying to keep her voice down, even though she was so excited at the thought of being able to step into the pages of one of her favorite books. Could you imagine exploring years gone by or seeing what lies ahead hundreds of years in the future? That would be a book fair to remember for sure. Levi, Ivy, and Alexandria were now definitely lost in their thoughts again, and there was no chance they would be completing their math worksheets anytime soon. But lucky for them, it was time to head to the book fair, the moment they had been waiting for all year long. The book buddies ran right to the front of the line and patiently waited for their teacher to walk down to the courtyard. And once they were there, it was everything they could have ever wanted. The stalls, tents, and bookshelves they helped arrange the day before were now filled with books. Old classics and new titles shared the space and created an atmosphere of wonder and delight. The other kids ran through and picked up books here and there, but the book buddies walked slowly through, marveling at all they saw. Each book was better than the last. Then they heard a familiar voice and turned around to say hello. "Hi, kiddos," said Mrs. Whittaker in her sing-songy voice. "Welcome to the book fair. She is a beauty this year, isn't she? I would say the best one since I've been a librarian here." "Hi, Mrs. Whittaker," said Ivy. Does it being the best book fair ever have anything to do with what you told us yesterday? Yeah, added Levi. About it being magic? Not so loud, Levi, said Mrs. Whittaker. We can't have everyone knowing about the magic of this year's book fair. There's just not that much magic to go around after all. I told you, Ivy and Alexandria, because I know how deeply you enjoy reading, and since the day is here, I am able to tell you what the magic is. Mrs. Whittaker walked Levi, Ivy, and Alexandria over to one of the bookstalls and then showed them a row of books. They just so happened to be all of their favorites. The Enchanted Chronicles, The Quest for the Lost Treasure, and The Time Traveler's Journal. Their jaws dropped as they saw the books. But why were they so excited? They had obviously seen these titles countless times before. They were their favorite books after all. Well, that is true. But this time, they looked different. Very different. Each book seemed to shimmer and glow, and they couldn't help but walk forward to get a closer look. Can we pick them up? Asked Ivy. Absolutely, answered Miss Whittaker. That's why I brought you here. These books are for you, handpicked by me. I know they're your favorite. The book buddies each grabbed their book and thumbed through them. They knew each page by heart, but somehow they felt as if they were looking at them for the first time. A magical, mystical feeling washed over each of them, and that's when Mrs. Whittaker told them why this book fair was so special. I'm so happy to finally be able to tell you about the magic, began Mrs. Whittaker. Since this is the 100th year that we've celebrated our school's love of reading with a book fair, a very special opportunity has been presented to us. That opportunity is the ability to step into your favorite book and discover the tales and stories for yourself in a whole new way. Not just through the written word, but using all your other senses as well. We knew it, exclaimed Alexandria. Not so loud, whispered Ivy. Yes, we knew it. I'm so happy that you were right, Ivy, said Levi, looking closely at his copy of The Quest for the Lost Treasure. Well, so we get to hop into our favorite books, screamed Ivy in a whisper. Well, you could, but I don't know if you should, said Mrs. Whittaker. But isn't it fun to just imagine what it would be like? I can't exactly send the three of you off to some magical world in the middle of a school day. I don't think your teacher, your parents, or the school principal would like that very much. The book buddy's excitement level went from 100 to 0 in 2 seconds flat. And it was then that Mrs. Whittaker got called away because two of the kids were playing frisbee with one of her books about frisbees. I'll be right back, she said as she left the book buddies standing in the bookstall with their magical books. And I assume you know what happens next. That's right, Levi, Ivy, and Alexandria just put down their books and went about their day as normal. Wrong! Levi, Ivy, and Alexandria looked at each other and in no time decided that they would be taking a much closer look at these magical books. I mean, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, said Ivy. Mom and Dad are always happy when we're reading, added Levi. And we'll be back in time for lunch, said Alexandria. So then, on the count of 3, they placed their books on the ground in front of them, opened to the favorite chapter, and jumped in feet first. See you in a bit, they called to each other as they disappeared into a puff of smoke. It was right then that Mrs. Whittaker arrived back at the bookstall and found the books on the ground and the book buddies nowhere to be found. Oh no, she said to herself, but they're good kids. I'm sure everything will be okay. Oh, I hope everything will be okay. Meanwhile, in the pages of their favorite books, Levi, Ivy, and Alexandria were having the time of their lives. Levi found himself exploring the caves of courage with the wily boys just as he had always imagined. He found jewels and gold piled as high as the eye could see. He helped fight off pesky pirates that wanted to take the treasure for themselves, and he made lasting friendships with the wily boys and all the animals that called the forest around the caves of courage home. In the Enchanted Chronicles, Ivy flew through dewdrop-covered fields with shimmering fairies to visit roly-poly gnomes who lived in toadstool homes with mossy green lawns. Gentle giants picked her up and placed her on top of a marvelous mountain where she could see all the enchanted land below. The smell of pine needle tea and honeysuckle cookies filled the air, and she couldn't imagine a more beautiful place. Alexandria found herself zipping through the night sky toward a planet she had never seen or read about just over 1,000 years in the future. Alien crafts flew beside her as friendly aliens waved her on and welcomed her to their world. She journaled all about it in her time traveler's journal, just like she had read about so many times before. The day stretched on, but as they journeyed forward, they felt a tug to go back. They each thought at the same time that they needed to go back home. Living a day in their favorite book was unbelievable, but it was now time to return to the other side of the pages. It was then that they all found themselves in the same area. It was a blank landscape filled with only them and a wise old owl named Orin. He nodded his head as a gesture of welcome and simply pointed one wing toward a glowing orb. Through the bright rays of the orb, they could see their school's book fair. They could also see their teacher, their classmates, and Mrs. Whittaker. She looked worried because she knew where they had gone. They knew at that moment that they needed to go home. They waved to Orin as they walked toward the glowing orb, and in no time they were all back in the bookstall where they had started their great adventure. "I am so happy you're back," exclaimed Mrs. Whittaker. "How was it?" "Well, it's going to sound funny to say when talking about a book, but there are no words to describe the experience other than magical," said Ivy. "Thank you, Mrs. Whittaker," added Levi. "Yeah, we'll never forget this," said Alexandria. "I am so happy to hear that, and please keep the books as a gift from me to you," said Mrs. Whittaker. "Enjoy the rest of the book fair, kids." Mrs. Whittaker walked off as Levi, Ivy, and Alexandria recounted to each other all of the amazing adventures they had in their books. And they knew that was only the beginning. The Book Fair Chronicles. Chapter 1 was a real page-turner for sure, and they couldn't wait for the next chapter to begin. Stay tuned for the next part of the Book Fair Chronicles. Want to start a podcast? Spotify has an easy free platform called Spotify for Podcasters. Here's how it works. Record and edit your podcast on your phone or computer with ease. Share your podcast on Spotify and all other major platforms. You can even make video podcasts on Spotify. If you want to engage with your audience more, use Q&A and polls. You can earn money through ads and podcast subscriptions. It's completely free, no hidden cost. Give it a try. Visit www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. We love making our podcast, and working with Spotify has been amazing. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the story and learned a little something too.
And since we know everyone has their own story, we'd love to hear yours.
If you have an idea for a Lively Lewis story, leave a comment on our Apple Podcast review page with 5 stars, your idea, and your little one's name.
Then maybe our next adventure will be with you.
Until our next Storytime Hangout.
Thanks for listening. We can't wait to share another fun, Lively Lewis story with you.